Okay, everyone, welcome, and let's go. Let's roll. What happened to my other? Oh, there they are. Thank you. My mishkafayim. Thank you. The reading one. Okay. Tonight is a very holy night to learn Chassidus. Tonight is the great Yortzeit from the holy Arizal. How many years? I think the Arizal passed away in 1573. So in that sense, it's 400 and 451 years. 451. Last year was 450. That's interesting. Since the Arizal's passing. So tonight is the great Yortzeit meaning the day of passing of the Ari. Passed away in the city of Tzfat. And the great master and teacher of Kabbalah, which is the beginning of the lights of Mashiach, the beginning of the lights of the Giyul of the redemption. When Mashiach will come and will be fully here, there will be the greatest revelation of the Torah secrets. And the Holy Ari was at the forefront of that revelation. He is paving the way for the revelation of the secrets of the Torah. So on this great night, it's really great to study about that expansion, the inside expansion that's going to be in our minds when Mashiach comes, in which incredible new, a whole new level of understanding is going to be downloaded, and is going to transform the Torah on levels that we have no inkling, even we can't even begin to imagine. And once the Torah is going to be transformed by its powerful inside lights revealed, it's going to bring a radical change in the universe as well. Because as we were learning, if those of you following the Lukus channel, God creates and sustains the world through the Torah. So the expansion in the Torah will bring the expansion in everything in the world. And primarily, it's going to cause the land of Israel to expand. As we once learned the discourse over here for we spent about 7-8 weeks learning this discourse, and we only got to a third of it, maybe. Then we quit because it got too difficult. At that time, I couldn't handle the expansion. So tonight we're also going to learn a discourse along the same lines. This week is Parshat Devarim, and in this week's Torah portion, Moshe is speaking to the Jewish people and telling them about reviewing with them the story of the last 40 years, because the Jewish people were now standing with Moshe, ready to enter the land of Israel. So Moshe was doing a little. He was going in memory lane with them by taking them through all the various different experiences that happened to them in the 40 years. And he tells them, see, we're ready, that God said to him, look, you're ready to go into the land of Israel. See, I have already placed before you the land of Sichon. I think this is a statement right at the beginning of the Torah portion, and I think if I'm not making a mistake, it's the verse where Rashi tells us. It's the verse. So I want to just text this person a second. It's an important thing, so please forgive me. It's the verse where Rashi tells us that since Moshe was ready right now, Moses was ready to rebuke the Jewish people. He was gonna, with his parting words, he left them with words of rebuke. Later, he's going to give blessings as well, but he needs to straighten them out. Rashi says that before a person shouldn't rebuke his children or his students until the end of their life. In other words, the purpose of the rebuke is obviously to teach them, to guide them, but don't do it earlier, because it's not good to have to re-rebuke someone. You deliver the rebuke one time, but if you're going to give it once and then they're going to take it and then not completely rectify, you're going to have to do it a second time. No good. A rebuke is supposed to be done one time. So Moshe is now at the end of his life. He's going to rebuke the Jewish people. So right at the beginning, he mentions, no, it's not this verse. It's not this verse. I'm just remembering now. It's not this verse. I don't have a chumash in front of me, and I can't. And I'm trying to remember where in the Torah portion this verse is mentioned. If I had a chumash, Devarim. Sorry for the delay. A second. That'll do. Hachilosi. Oh, maybe it's all the way in the end of the parsha. Let's see. I think it might be all the way in the end of the parsha, and the end of the Torah portion. There was. Oh, here it is. It's at Shishi, at the sixth reading in Deuteronomy chapter number 2, verse 31. God says to me, see, Hachilosi, I have begun Teis Lefanecha, to place before you, or to put before you, which means for you to conquer, as Sichon ves Arizal. Sichon was the king of Sichon was the king of Amorite. Sichon Melech Amorite was the king of Amorite. And so God had given the Amorites, and he was a giant, and he was a formidable warrior, an impossible person to fight. He was a gibor. He was an incredible warrior and a very, very mighty person. And God was the one who took him down and bent him in front of Moshe. So God says, see, take a look. I have given you Sichon and his land. Hachel Rosh, L'Resha says Arzo. You have begun to, what does the word Rosh mean? Hold on over here. Start driving him out. Hachel Rosh. Start driving him out. L'Resha says Arzo, to take possession of his land. So this is referring to the land of Sichon. Now, the land of Sichon were on the eastern banks of the Jordan River. On the eastern bank of the Jordan River. And the other land that God had, at that point, allowed Moshe to conquer, this is not part of Israel, because the land of Israel is only on the western side of the Jordan River. It's the eastern side. So the other land that God had allowed the Jewish people then to conquer was Og, who was the other giant, the king of Bashan. So these are two territories that the Jewish people conquered on the way into the land of Israel. In the end, we learned last week in the Torah portion how 2.5 tribes came to Moshe and said to Moses, to Moshe, give us this land, because it's a land of good pasture. We have a lot of sheep. We have a lot of cattle. This is good it's good grazing fields. And Moshe makes a condition with them, and he gives them that land. So this is like kind of annexed to the land of Israel. This like becomes part of the land of Israel on the eastern side of the Jordan. The sages are take note of the verse that it says, Hachel. Hachel means I have begun to give you the land of Sichon. What does it mean, I have begun to give you the land of Sichon? He completed, they gave it to him already. What is like, see to it, I have started. So based on this teaching, I think it's based on that nuance. I'm not sure. I didn't get a chance to look this up. But what the sages say over here is something interesting, that really some of the territory of Sichon, the Amorite, and of Og, some of the territory of Og, were both essentially forbidden territory for the Jewish people to take possession. Why? Because this is territory that God had warned the Jewish people they may not touch. And yet, they got an allowance to take it when they were originally told they're not allowed. Now, why is that? It's because God orchestrated events many years before to allow the Jewish people to enter and begin and take a piece of this land. How did that happen? It happened as follows. Let's first talk about the prohibition. There were 3 lands that are in the side of the land of Israel, coming from the southeast. The entire the southeast corner of the land of Israel was where Edom lived. The Edomites. It's called the land of Edom, or the land of Seir. Then, as you turn up north and you go from the southern border over to the eastern border of the land, where the Jordan River flows, that entire area was as follows. You had the country of Moab, and above the Moab were the Ammon. So Edom, who are these 3 nations? So these 3 nations are our kind of family of the Jewish people. They weren't like the inhabitants of the land of Canaan. They're the land of the 7 nations. These were ancient pagan cultures that were not relatives to the Jewish people. I mean, all the way back, yeah, we're all relatives, all humanity, but it's not. But these 3 lands were much closer to us. Why? Because Edom are the descendants of Esau, the brother of Yaakov. So that's the land of Edom. The land of Moab and Ammon, these are the 2 children of Lot. Lot is Abraham's brother-in-law, the brother of Sarah, who was a tag-along, who came along with when God says to Abraham, go leave Mesopotamia and go to the land of Canaan, go to the land of Israel. This Lot tags along. Now, Lot had a merit. The merit that he had was that when there was a famine in the land, one of the first stories we read in the Torah about Abraham, when there was a famine in the land and Abraham goes down to Egypt, Abraham wanted to protect himself. So he says about his wife that she's his sister, not his wife. And Lot could have given it away because he knew the truth that they were married, and he kept his mouth shut, just for keeping silent and not getting Abraham in trouble that he was telling that he wasn't saying the truth, which Lot was rewarded, and the reward was that God gave his descendants these 2 countries. Ammon and Moab have these 2 countries on the side of Israel. Now, for one moment, who are Ammon and Moab. They're the two sons of Lot that Lot fathered from his daughters. It was after the story when Sodom was destroyed. Remember that story? When God turned over Sodom and Amorah, those 5 cities. So the angels came to extract Lot and took him out, save him, and because of Abraham, the merit of Abraham. They ran for the hills. They went into a cave, and they thought that the entire world was destroyed. So in order to procreate and recreate the world, the daughters went and they got their father drunk, and they became impregnated by their father, both the older and the daughter. And in that, and these were their children, Ammon and Moab. So Ammon and Moab are our cousins. And when God, who for whatever reason, even though God owns the entire world, considers those countries in the Middle East primarily his real estate, his own private property. So the main chunk of it he gives to the Jewish people, and the neighboring countries he gives them to the children of Esau's Edom, and Ammon and Moab. They get that part of land. And God warned the Jewish people that they should not touch that land. They were not allowed to go fight a war against him. That's why if you see when the Jews trek through the desert, they encircle these lands. The Torah describes at great length how they encircled these lands. They weren't even allowed to trespass without permission. They asked permission to go through, but the king of Edom didn't let them. So they went all the way around. There was a much longer trek to the land of Israel because they were forbidden to start up with these countries, with these lands. Now, in essence, why is this land God's real estate more than London and Paris? And God gifted them, one to Esau. Esau got a gift because Esau, we understand, he's an inheritor. But Lot, as we said before, was rewarded because he was quiet. So he got a reward. But why these lands? Because really these lands are also really in the ultimate foresight, in the ultimate state, they're all going to be part of Israel. These lands are going to be part of the land of Israel. This land includes Jordan. That's all part of Israel. The lands because when God promised Abraham initially by the covenant between the pieces, which called Bris Bein Absarim and Parshas Lech Lecha, he tells him, I will give your descendants, will inherit the land of, and God lists 10 nations. 3 of those nations are Keni, Knizi, and Kadmoni. That's how God calls them. These are the territory that later Hashem gives to Esau and to Lot, these 3 countries. Those are the 3 lands that are there. And to the Jewish people, God only gave the 7. Now, in the days of Mashiach, Hashem is going to allow the Jewish people to take possession of those 3 lands, and they too will become the land of Israel and will be holy with the holiness of the land of Israel, possessed by the Jewish people. If you want to listen to a very interesting class about the Jewish people inhabiting the land of Israel, listen to the 2 classes I gave this week called The Elimination of Evil, Tear by Tear. Really worth listening to, especially last night's class of 3 hours. In any case, so these 3 countries will become part of the land of Israel. But at the time when we went out of Egypt, which is over 3,000 years ago, it was forbidden for us to touch that land. Now, watch this. The lands of the Amorite. Now, where is Og? Where is Og and Sichon? The 2 countries that the Jewish people did conquer on the way to the land of Israel. It's further north. On the eastern side, if you continue going up north, so past Moab, past Ammon, you go further up, that's the land of Sichon, of the Amorite, and Og, the king of Bashan. Way higher up. Okay? Now, the Talmud tells us something really interesting. those lands also once belonged, some of those lands, not the whole, but parts of those lands were also once belonging to these two nations, Ammon and Moab. If they were the lands of Ammon and Moab, they were off limits to the Jewish people. How then did the Jewish people conquer it when they were not allowed to touch that land? The answer is Sichon, an aggressive king, fought a war against Moab and snatched a piece of the territory of Moab, and he annexed it to his land. He conquered it and made it part of the Amorite land. Now, since King Sichon took the land of Moab and turned it into Amorite land, it's no more called Moabite land. So it now became purified. These are the words the sages used. It became purified for the Jewish people. The words they use is purified. It's almost as if the land was dipped in a mikvah. It's like till now it was forbidden, but now it became permissible. In other words, had Sichon not come before that and conquered, and so it's almost like Russia came and snatched a piece of Ukraine, the Crimea, right? And Russia and Putin says it's my land, right? So that when the Torah recognizes that nations will conquer lands, and according to the Torah, that's valid. It could work. It creates ownership. When one nation conquers the land of another nation, it creates ownership. So it was disowned by the Moabites, and it became the land of the Amorites. Now, since the Amorites were not off limits, the land of the Amorites was kosher for the Jewish people. So for that reason, parts of the future land became kosher for the Jewish people back then. So we are now going to learn what the mystical explanation of that is, because everything in the physical is a reflection of the mystical, and it's going to come in three parts. Part number one, what's the reason why, if God promised Abraham a land of 10 nations, why does God give it in 2 installments? Why is one installment a land of 7, and then later, and only at a latter point, do we get the other 3? In order to understand that, we need to understand what's the spiritual dynamics of the lands of the 7. What does the 7 lands mean? And what does the 3 lands mean? Because every land has an energy of what it represents, a spiritual quality. Once we understand the spiritual quality, we'll understand why, until Mashiach comes, we don't have access to the very lofty spiritual quality of the 3 lands. That's going to be stage number 2. We'll understand the difference between the lands of the 7 and the lands of the 3, and why they were off access. But if that's the case, that the land of the 3 is a very lofty and very high energy, which was not attainable at that time, so why is it that we got a little nibble from it? We took a little bite out of it. How did we take a bite out of it? Because the Sichon king, the Amorite, conquered part of the land, and in Yiddish there's a term, he kashered it for us. He made it kosher for us, and then it now became kosher. If we're not meant to get it until Messianic times, how did we get it earlier? So all these ideas is what he's going to explain in the discourse. Ready? Here we go. Hachilosi Teis Lefanecha, see that I have begun to give before you. Sichon, the land of Sichon. Hine Arizal, the sages, Talos Chulin and Mesechtes Chulin. And where am I teaching from? I'm teaching from the book of Or HaTorah. It's this Sefer, and from the Tzemach Tzedek, third Chabad Rebbe. And this is in the first volume of the book of Deuteronomy. I think there are 6 volumes in Deuteronomy, maybe 6 or 7. This is the first volume of Devarim, page 19, Daf Yotes. Hine Arizal Chulin, Perek Eli Trefos, The Gemara says in Masechtas Chulin in the Perik of Elu Treifos, Daf Samach Seif Amud Beis. Page is page 60 and the end of the second side. Ammon and Moab, that the two countries of Ammon and Moab, Tiaru b'Sichon, became kosher, became purified through Sichon. By Sichon conquering these lands, he made them now permissible for the Jewish people. Look in Rashi over there in the Talmud. Rashi explains, Chatzi Eretz Ammon, half of the land of Ammon. V'chein b'Moab, and so too in Moab, Cheshbon. The city of Cheshbon, which was the capital of Sichon. Sichon lived in Cheshbon, was really a Moabite city. Sichon captured it from Moab, and he proclaimed himself king in that city. It was a very strong city. It was a very difficult to conquer, and he managed to conquer that city. He made it his capital, and while Cheshbon was off limits to the Jewish people when it would belong to Moab, now it became kosher. And so is also in the Midrash Rabbah in the end of Parshas Chukas. So what does this mean? The Inyan and the idea is Kiliel Menei Hiskir Shloisha Umais. Before this, it mentions three nations. That God had forbidden to the Jewish people when they go into the land. God had made it forbidden to the Jewish people to conquer the lands of these three nations. Like it says in Midrash Rabbah in Lech Lecha, Soif Perik Mem Dalet, in the end of chapter 44. The Issa Sham, and it says over there, Shehem. What are these three nations? Keni, Knizi, Kadmoini. These are the three nations, Keni, Knizi, Kadmoini, which are not part of the seven nations. The seven nations are Haknani, Hachiti, Hamoiri, Haprizi, Hachivi, Vayavusi, Vahagirgashi. Those are the names of the seven nations. In addition to them, there is Keni, Knizi, and Kadmoini. What's really interesting that in the covenant that God makes to Abraham, Keni, if I'm not mistaken, Keni, Knizi, and Kadmoini are the first three that he says. It's not like he says them in the end. Those are actually the first ones that God mentions, and then he mentions another seven. God gave it as a gift to Abraham by the covenant between the pieces. Lech Lecha, look in Parshas Lech Lecha, Tezvav Yotes, chapter 15, verse 19. However, although God promised it to Abraham, the implementation of that promise will not be fulfilled until Messianic times. In the days of Mashiach, it's going to belong to the Jewish people. However, now, Rak Shiva Nasan Lehem, God gave to the Jewish people only 7 of those lands. Like it says, Shiva Goyim Rabim, the 7 great nations, Rabim that are many, Va'atzumim and Mecca, they are more powerful than you. Also in this week's Torah portion. Devarim, no, not this week. In Devarim Parshas Ekev. In 2 weeks from now, Parshas Ekev, Perek Zayin Aleph, it says that God is bringing you to the land of 7 nations who are more powerful than you. They're more than you in people. They outnumber you and they outgun you, and yet God is gonna give you their lands, but only 7, not the 10. Look in Midrash Rabbah, Tafresh Nun Vav Gimel b'Pasuk b'Yom Hashvi Nasi Lebnei Ephraim. Ephraim was Roishi, where he brings a verse over there about Ephraim, and he says Sham Chashav Gimel Imois. And it's interesting. We know what are these 3 nations. As we said, Keni, Knizi, and Kadmoini. When we translate them into the Keni, Knizi, Kadmoini seems to be ancient names, but then God settles who into those lands. God did put his people close to the Jewish people. He put the children of Esau there, Esav, and Ammon and Moab. So these are the nations. Edom, Ammon, and Moab. The 3 that we're not allowed to take. But in Midrash, it mentions two of them, Ammon and Moab. The third one, it says the Philistines. It doesn't mention Edom. It's interesting. Moab, I'm sorry, it doesn't mention Ammon. It mentions one of Lot's, Moab, Edom, and Plishtim. So it takes out Ammon, the second son of Lot is omitted, and the three that are mentioned is Moab, Edom, and Plishtim. The Tzarech Ian. He leaves it with a question. How do we reconcile? Is it Plishtim in the Philistine land, or is it the Ammon land? In any case, the Im Kol Zeh, now, based on what we know now that we were forbidden to take these three lands, the Im Kol Zeh, Ktsas, Ammon, and Moab, a little bit of two of those countries, not three. Edom we didn't touch at all. But some of Ammon and Moab did become part of the land of Israel already back then. Tiaru b'Sichon, because Sichon made it kosher to the Jewish people by first slicing off those countries from the rest of Ammon and Moab, from snatching a piece away from Ammon and Moab and making it Amorite land. Now that territory became permissible for the Jewish people to conquer. And to understand this idea. Why these days we only have 7? And in the future, we're going to have all 10. So you look in the Siddur from the Alter Rebbe, where he speaks about a similar idea, where you have a current state of 7 and a future state of 10. So where is that? It says that we're going to sing to God on a musical instrument that's called an asor. Asar. Ale asar. Ale asar va'ale novel. Alehi goyon bechinar. It's the verse of Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos. It's the song that we sing special for Shabbos, chapter 91, Psalm 91 in Psalms. So what is asar? Asar comes from the word eser. It's a type of harp. It's a stringed musical instrument like a cello, violin. It's a harp, but it has 10 strings. And the Talmud tells us that in the temple, that what we had in the past, they also had musical instruments similar to it, but it only had 7 strings. But in Mashiach's times, it's going to have 10. Sometimes we refer to it as Mashiach's times, it's going to have 8, the 8th note. But in other times, it says it's going to be 10. So there we see the same difference, that for some reason, our current time is associated with 7, and in the future, it's going to be 10, both in our music that we play and in our territory of the land that we have possession. So in the Siddur, the Alter Rebbe explains this. The Alter Rebbe is the Tzemach Tzedek's grandfather. So he says, look at my grandfather's Sefer. So we first are going to preface this by explaining as follows. Sheba Atzilus yesh esses sfiros. We know that in the world of Atzilus, there are 10 attributes. Okay? 10 attributes in the world of Atzilus. However, in the chambers of the 3 lower worlds, now, whatever we're going to learn now is all Arizal. In other words, in the books of the Ari, that's why it's appropriate to learn this tonight. In the writings of the Arizal explains to us, he maps out all the spiritual worlds. So in Atzilus, obviously not obviously, but a lot of it is Daris was derived from the Zohar, but a lot of it was clearly revealed to us through the Ari. So it says like this: in Atzilus, there's 10 Sephiroth, but in the 3 lower worlds after Atzilus, which is Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya, which are the we know that's called Biyah, which stand for the range of the creation already, the created realm. Bria, Yetzira is formation, Asiya is completion, our material world. it speaks of that there are 7 chambers, 7 hechalot. There are 7 chambers, and to tell you, the highest chamber is called the chamber of the Holy of Holies. That's the highest. That's chamber number 1 in the world of Bria. Chamber number 7 is called, the last one is called Hechal Livnas Hasapir. It's the chamber of the bricks of sapphire. That's the lowest chamber. And in between them, there are another 5 chambers. Hechal Ava, there's a chamber of love. Hechal Haratzon, I think. There's different chambers. And Livnas, okay. So these are the reason I'm mentioning that last one is because he speaks about that last chamber later. But the question that he asks is, if the world of Atzilus is structured with a structure of 10, so why is the next 3 worlds structured with a system of 7? Wouldn't it make sense that since Atzilus is a prelude to the lower worlds, Atzilus, as we're learning in the Allowance channel, we've been learning a lot about it in the last discourse, Atzilus is the mediating world between the Ein Sof, between God and worlds. So you would think that everything in Atzilus, based on the dynamics, the structure, the map, the design of Atzilus should be imprinted on the lower worlds. And yet we find no, that the lower worlds are structured with 7 chambers versus Atzilus, that's 10. And in the chambers of Biyah, of Bria, Tzir, and Asiya, hem Shiva Hecholos. What is spoken in the Kabbalah about these worlds is that there are 7 chambers. Hanisker Bezoyar Pashas Bereshis. Now these chambers, I mentioned earlier that I told this from Ari, but the original statement about the 7 chambers is mentioned in Zohar Pashas Bereshis, the Sof Pashas Pekudei, in the end of Parshas Pekudei. Ube Pardes, Share Cholos, Perek Tes, and in the book of Pardes, Pardes is a book from the Arizal's teacher, the Ramak, or rather, the Arizal was a student for a very short time. He was the Rebbe of the mystics. He was the teacher of Kabbalah, the primary teacher of Kabbalah right before the Ari. The Ari took him over when he passed away. So in Pardes Shar Hecholos, Perek Tes, Hiksha, he actually asks this question. Lama hem zayin hecholos. Why are there only 7 chambers? Why aren't there 10? V'loy eser and not 10. Va'atiritz pidish b'sefer Emek HaMelech. And the answer, we turn over the page. The answer is given in the book of Emek HaMelech, Shar Olam Habriya, in the portal of Olam Habriya. Reish Perek Zayin, he says over there, I think the Emek HaMelech is one of the students of the Ari. Ki Olam is Biyah, because the 3 lower worlds, Bria, Yetzir, and Asiya, Ikra, Visharsha, Masha Nimtze Behem Tadir. The reason why there are only 7 chambers in the worlds of Bria, Yetzir, and Asiya, when we say 7 chambers in those worlds, means each of those worlds have 7. The structure of each of those worlds is 7 chambers. But the reason for that is because the main input, the main shoresh of divine input that flows into that world, asher nimtze behem tadir, that is essential to their essential makeup of those worlds, ham shiva spheros lavad, or only 7 spheros. In other words, the infrastructure of the 3 lower worlds is made up of 7 spheros of Atzilus. In other words, the 7 spherot of Atzilus are what extend their influence into the 3 lower worlds and structure the 3 lower worlds. So that's why the chambers of the worlds match these 7 energies. Now, it doesn't mean that what happens with the 3 other, the three there's 10 spheros. So what happens with the remaining 3, which are the first 3, which are the intellectual spheros, the Chabad? What happens with the Chabad? Where are those spheros? They are also introduced into the 3 lower worlds, but when they come as an addition. It's not part of the primary infrastructure. So that would make a difference. Atzilus itself, the infrastructure, the design of the world of Atzilus is made up of 10 spheros. The 10 components of Atzilus make up the realm of Atzilus, because Atzilus is divine. Atzilus is not really a world. But the next 3 worlds that are really worlds, their spiritual makeup, their structure is a structure only of 7 spheros, not of 10. There's an extra 3 that that illuminate from time to time, but that's not part of the structure. That is an add-on. It's an added feature that if we pay for it, we get it. If we don't pay for it, it doesn't come. It's like sometimes there's certain models of cars that have certain basic, they have leather seats, and it's the essence, it's the makeup of this car. Okay, but then you have cheaper brands of cars where the essential car does not have these features. If you want and you pay extra and you have an extra ordered, you can order and add those features in as well. And that's the difference. Atzilus is rich. Atzilus has got 10, which makes up, it's it's born with 10. That's the way it was initially designed. The 3 lower worlds, they're structured on their base is a base of 7. There is Chabad influence, Chachma Bina Das, the 3 elements, but that's an addition. And that depends on how we behave. If we deserve and we earn, we bring an influx of enlightenment into the 3 lower worlds, and the worlds are enlightened. So that's the answer that he gives why the 3 lower worlds of Bria, Tzir, and Asiya are made up of 7 Heichalos. That's what makes up the world, because that's the world of itself. It doesn't have enough. If it would be structured with 10, it would have another 3 Heichalos for the 3 Mochin, for the Chachma Bina Das. But because it's not part of the makeup of the world, it's a bonus. So illumination of that comes into the 3 lower worlds, but it doesn't get a special chamber for that. Okay. So Ikram v'shashav shenimtze b'hem tadirem shiva spheres lavad are only 7. That which is always part of the 3 lower worlds. Shehein, which they are. It's interesting. Instead of calling it chagas, which is chesed, gevurah, teferes, he calls it gagas. Gagas is because many Kabbalists refer to chesed as gedula. Gedula is chesed, like it says in the pasuk, L'cha Hashem hagedula v'hagevura v'hateferes. So gedula is chesed. Gedula means greatness. Greatness is chesed, kindness, expansion. So he says the 7 main Sephiroth that are always there in the 3 lower worlds are Gagas, which is Gevura, which is Chesed. Gedula, which is Chesed, Gevura, strength, and Teferes. And then Netzachod Yesod Malchus. It's those 7 Sephiroth. The Fishan is Havu. And the reason for that is, so the question is why? Why are they not privy to the other 3 to be part of the infrastructure? You just explained the fact, but you didn't give me a why. What's the reason why when God designed them to begin with, he designs them only initially with 7 powers, not 8, based on a system of 7. I'm sorry, not 10. And the answer to that is because the 3 lower worlds are products of the world of Tohu. They are a outcome of the crashed worlds of Tohu. Atzilus, the world of Atzilus, is a product of the world of Tikun. Now, the concept of Tikun and Tohu we spoke about many times, but these are 2 systems in divine emanation and divine flow. Tohu is a system in where divine energy unpurposely gets broken and shattered for the purpose of creating a mess, so that there can be entertainment to God when we clean up his mess, and to us, and we could all have an amazing story, which is going to be the ultimate story of all of existence, how we figured out our way through the maze of challenges back into God's loving arms. So that's the challenge. In order to create the challenge, there had to be disconnect. And the disconnect comes about because Hashem emanates very powerful lights, and the lights are too powerful, and there are some kind of vessels there that are supposed to hold the lights, and they can't, and they shatter. Now, those shards that shattered, it's a spiritual concept. Obviously, we're not talking about physical pieces of glass, but those shards that broke when the tohu shattered, eventually it evolves into creation, into the creation that we inhabit. 3 tiers of creation: Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. It's all made up of a mixture of good and evil. It's all a blend. It's all because it's made up of broken pieces. Now, since the world of Tohu, what shattered in the world of Tohu? 7 Sephiroth shattered. The lower 7 Sephiroth, the 3 higher ones did not. There were 10 Sephiroth in Tohu. Because when Hashem emanates, he emanates a system of 10, not a system of 7. In other words, for whatever reason, Hashem chooses to emanate with 10 powers. So even the world of Tohu, as God emanates, he emanated 10. But what shattered was only 7. Therefore, the byproduct of that shattering of those vessels is the creation of the creation, the worlds, which was created with some of the toxic material of what shattered, and that's the toxicity that's within the world that we need to purify, cleanse, and the darkness, the difficulties that make up our reality. But since the shattering of the vessels was only in the 7 Sephiroth, that's why in the lower 3 worlds there's only 7 energies, not 8, and for that reason there are 7 chambers. However, Atzilus is not a byproduct of the world of Tohu. After the world of Tohu shattered, God reintroduced new light, and this time it was far more restrained, not wild energies. It was able to be held by the vessels, and that's the world of Atzilus. So nothing broke on that world, so it's the 10. It's just purely 10. But the 3 lower worlds that come after Atzilus, they were produced from the broken world of Tohu, and what broke in Tohu were only 7, so therefore they are built with a system of 7. Now, since the way we fix the world of Tohu, which is our reality, our broken reality, the way we fix it is through Torah, which Torah comes from the world of Tikun. That's why it's our job to add the 3, to fix the world by drawing from the world of Tikun, which is to bring down the energies of 10, not just the energies of 7. So that's what he said earlier. It's not like there's no Chabad, there's no Mochin, there's no intellectual energies or revelations in our world. Of course there is, but it comes as a addition to the world. It's not there automatically. And you see it, an example. Torah, think about it. Torah was added to the world later in creation. Torah is Chabad. Torah is the Chachma Bin Adas. When was it added to the world? At a later point. For 2,500 years, close to 2,500 years, the world was without Torah. And then the world was just an emotional world. And that's why it was created in 7 days of the 7 emotions, corresponding to the 7 chambers. Everything only 7. And then we started adding on the Chabad to the world later. Okay, let's read it. Lefi, and the reason for that is Shesavusam, because they came into existence, Mezayin Kalim, from the 7 vessels, the Olam HaTohu, of the world of Torah, Shanishberu, that broke. Now we do know that in Bria, Yetzir, and Asiya there is Mochin. We can't say that in these three worlds there's no mochen. Of course, there is mochen. Mochen means intellectual. The very idea that we have intellect. We're not just emotional beings. We have intelligence. The human being is superior to other creatures, that it has a superior intelligence over there's some intelligence to animals too, but the human being. So we see that there is mochen in this world. However, it's an add-on. And that's what he's explaining. And we also know that in the higher worlds, the souls in Gan Eden, the souls that are in the Garden of Eden, what's with those souls? They study Torah all the time, which means they're illuminated with the lights of Chabad. Oh, that's what he says. But the mochen of Bria, Tzir, and Asiya, Einam Tedirim, it's not constant. It fluctuates. It's ups and downs. And they don't exist in these worlds. It's not found in them. It's only introduced into the worlds when there is an arousal from below. When we stimulate it through all the good deeds we do, mitzvahs, Torah, we draw down these mochen. Beside man, this is the secret of Maya Nukfin, feminine waters. Feminine waters represents the concept that we cause God to give us something by first sending something up from our world to him, causing him to respond and bestow his blessings to us, including enlightenment, which is the greatest blessing. It's the first blessing of Shemona Esrei. You atachonein la'adam das. You give man knowledge. So that's a gift that God gives, but it's a gift that's added on. V'sham perik ches, and over there in that same book, which is the book Emek HaMelech, over there in the 8th chapter, Bir, there he explains it further. Ashashiva hechalois. Now, what are the 7 hechals? Now, hechal is not sphira. Sphira is an attribute. What's a hechal? Hechal is a chamber. So when we say that in each world are 7 chambers, we're not saying 7 sphirot. Now, we learned earlier that the world is built with the energies of 7 spheros. That's the underlying energy, the current that flows into the 3 lower worlds to create them, to sustain them, which part of those energies are from the shattered world of the primordial world of Tohu that shattered. Fine. But the world itself is made up of chambers. So what is these chambers? What is that? That's the Malchuth of each sphera. In other words, the Sphirot, the attributes, is divine energy that comes down to create and sustain that world. In each of these Sphirot, in the Chesed, for instance, example, the Chesed that comes into the world of Bria, God's kindness that comes into the world of Bria to sustain and to create the world of Bria, the kind elements of the world of Bria. So that Chesed contains, because in holiness, everything is interwoven and interconnected one with the other. So the Chesed has the Chesed of the Chesed, the Gevura of the Chesed, the Tiferes of the Chesed, and eventually it has the Malchus, the Malchut of the Chesed. The Malchus of the Chesed, that's the chamber, that's the Hechal. Malchus becomes a chamber. The energy that's higher than Malchus cannot be defined as a chamber. It's beyond space. It's still an energy that's higher than space. But the Malchut element, that creates the chamber, the Heichal, the hall of that world. The halls of those worlds could be galaxies. Talking about this, when it's not this little hall. You go from hall to hall. We're talking about these magnificent worlds. But it's the Malchus element of the Chesed that's in Bria. That's the first chamber. The Malchus element of the Gevura that flows into Bria, that's the second chamber. The Malchus element of the Tiferes of the world of Bria is the third chamber. And so you go through each of the 7 Sphirot. And then that's an Olam HaBria. Then the same is these energies are severely reduced into the next world, the world of Yetzirah, and in them itself, it also works that way. The Malchut element of the Chesed of Yetzirah is the chamber, the first chamber of Yetzirah, until we get to our world, which is also 7. Okay. That's the Malchus element of the 7 Spherois Aniskaliel that we mentioned earlier. And that's why you see an interesting thing. The word, what's the connection of a chamber, a Hechal, a chamber with Malchus? So I mentioned to you because Malchus is the source of space. Higher than Malchus, there's no space. So the space of every world is connected to Malchus. But that is, he doesn't say that, but that's I took from other places in Chassidus. But what he says over here is, he says, the word Hechal, the numeric value of the word Hechal is 65. Because Yud and Hey is 15, and Chaf and Mid is 50. So 65. Which is the same numeric value as the name Aleph, Dalid, Nun, Yud, Ado, which that name is the name of God when God is behaving as a king. Aleph, Dalid, Nun, Yud means master. So the energy of Malchus is called Aleph, Dalid, Nun, Yud, and that's the gematria of Hechal. So you see that Malchus forms the Hechal. Ki Hechal keminyan Shem Adna. Because Hechal is in the minion of Shem Adna. Hechal Kodesh HaKadoshim. So now he begins to enumerate the 7, the Hechalos. The first, he doesn't go through all 7, but he gives us the first. Hechal Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Hechal of the Holy of Holies. That's the Malchut of Gedula, of Chesed. Begedula is in Gedula, Hainu Chesed, which is kindness. V'zehu inyan Baruch Ata Hashem. Now this concept, that the Hechal, that the chamber of the worlds, the space of the worlds, which is related to the chambers of the world, is a derivative, is made up of Malchus. The Malchus is its substance. You see that when you say a blessing. Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu. Blessed is God, you God, our God. Melech Ha'olam, the king of the world. So Olam, that's Hechal. Olam is world, that's already space. What is Melech is the inner content of Olam of world. So you see that the Malchus produces the Hechal, the chamber. Baruch Ata Hashem Melech Olam, shebchinas Olam, that the concept of world, nimshach mebchinas Melech, is drawn from the concept of Melech. Comes out, and since there are 7 Malchuyot, there are 7 kingship energies in each of these worlds, it's the Malchut from each of the spheros that are illuminating in that world. That's why there are 7 chambers. Al Kopanim Hare Biur, but Al Kopanim from here we see that he explained She'inyan Zayin Acholos Elu Dibiyah, that the idea of these 7 chambers of Bria, Yetzir, and Asiya, Hainu Mebchinas Chesed ad Malchus. It's from Chesed until Malchus. So from there you go in from world to world, from chamber to chamber, you experience a different energy. Now in each chamber, there is gazillions of corridors and entities. This is like that. But there are 7 primary chambers in each world. And look, this is the makeup of the entire spiritual infrastructure of all of existence. Look in chapter 25 from that portal. Okay. And this that he says that the 7 are there constant, but the 3 are there only. The Mochen, the Chabad, is given to the world only at intervals. Whenever we deserve it, it's an extra bonus. Masha Kasef Tadir. And this that he says the word Tadir, which means a constant. There is a constant, and then there is depending on the time. Zahu al derech This is similar to the idea that we learn in Hasidus and other places, that there's something called shoresh and there's something called tosefes. Shoresh means the root, which is initially allocated. Tosefes is something that is added on to something. It's explained in Hasidus that in every stage, in every world, there is what's given to it, besod shoresh. This is its root. And then there is what is given to it, besod tosefes, added on. And it's explained, and we learned my Marim about this already, that the tosefes, the additions that are added on, are infinitely greater than what is always there. In the way things work in our realm, in the human experience, when someone has a salary, that this is your basic salary, and then you get bonuses, most of the time, the bonus is not larger than the salary. The bonus is an extra 10%, an extra 20%. So it's a portion that is given, something's an extra, whatever is the bonuses. But it's explained in Kabbalah, and we learned about it in Hasidus, in the different Memorim, that by God it's the opposite. What is given b'tzot shoresh, that's there, the worlds before Torah and mitzvahs, before we add on, the addings, we draw down, we this, is very minuscule, very little compared to what is added on. What is added on is way, way, way bigger and much more than what is initial tosefes. Because, and now we'll understand it as well, because the 7 emotions are very, 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 very little compared to the Chabad. Chabad is a much higher level. The intelligence is much greater in quality and in quantity. Now, he says, the truth is, even when you go up to a higher world, you go into Atzilus, we know that in Atzilus itself, there's 10 Sephiroth. But the 10 Sephiroth are divided into 4 partsufim. 4 partsufim means 4 configurations. Chachma is an entire partsuf. It's an entire configuration on its own. It's called partsuf Abba. It's called the partsuf, the configuration of father. Bina, although Bina is just one sphera, it's an entire partsuf. It's called partsuf Ema, the partsuf of mother. Then there are 6 emotions, and they're called parts of Zah, the parts of the configuration of the Ze'er Anpin. And then there is the last parts of Malchus, which is called parts of Nukva, the parts of the female, which is the parts of Malchus, the parts of the Shekhinah. So now each parts of is a configuration, a unit. Each parts of is an entire human. It's in the shape of a human. So a parts of, so for example, the Ze'er Anpin, it's not just emotion. It's an entire structure. And it has intelligence on its own. In addition to the Chabad, the Chachma and the Bina of Atzilus, the Ze'er Anpin also has its own Chabad. Obviously, the Chabad of Ze'er Anpin is much, much, much inferior to the Chabad to Chachma and Bina as it stands on its own. They are far higher than the Chabad of the Ze'er Anpin. But the Ze'er Anpin has a Chabad. However, what he's saying over here is that when God initially designs the Ze'er Anpin, he designs the Ze'er Anpin, the Shoresh is without a head, is just the emotions. The Chabad that is given to the Ze'er Anpin is added, comes to it besod tosefes. And in other words, the same feature, like we say, happens in the 3 lower worlds. That essentially they don't have Chabad, they don't have Mochin, they have emotions. The divine energies, the emotional energy of God flows in them. But the intelligence has to be gifted to them and brought in through service. And the truth is, in Atzilus as well, if you're looking at each partsuf on its own, the Ze'er Anpin is a Chabadless partsuf. And even though it does get Chabad, which is Chachma Bina Das, but its Chabad that it's getting is also considered Bitsod Tosefes, which means our mitzvahs that we do down here bring the Chabad to the Ze'er Anpin. we give the Ze'er Anpin a head. Now, since Ze'er Anpin a lot of times is referred to as God, that's why the Jewish people are called. God says to us, you are my head. You give me a head. The word Yisrael means Li Rosh. You give me a head. Without you, I don't have a head. I don't have a Chabad. Amen. Imagine that. Only in Hasidus you can learn that. We give him his head. Obviously, when we say him, we mean him as he manifests as the Ze'er Anpin, the conductor of the entire world. Yeah. Now we can say not only does he need us, without us, he doesn't even have a head. Asher came the same as also Zod Atzilus, the Ze'er Anpin of Atzilus. Netzal was emanated beside Shoresh. When it was emanated in the secret of Shoresh, of root. Rak vav ktsavois, only 6. It only has 6, the 6 directions, the 6. Vahamochin, and the intelligence, ba'an loy, is given to it beside Teisefes, in the secret of an addition. V'nikra rak nekuda echad, and it's called a dot. I don't know what he means by that. Maybe he means the mochin is called a nekuda that is added on. The yadua, and it is known. So now I'll understand. Wait, so what's the connection? Now we're basically saying that in Atzilus itself, there is such a concept. But we understand the reason why now. Because we know that the Yadua Shezun Hem Shoresh Tibiyah. In Atzilus itself, which part of Atzilus is really Atzilus, and which part of Atzilus is the source for the lower worlds. So it's explained in many places that Zun, Ze'er Anpin, and Malchuth, they are the real source for creation. Like we discussed many times, that God creates the world in 7 days, and in space there's also 6 directions and the middle point. That's because Hashem builds the worlds on the 7 emotions, like we discussed earlier. So the real shoresh of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, the real root in Atzilus for the lower worlds, for the realm of creation, is Zuchra Nukva, not Abba Ve'ima, not father and mother. Father and mother are above the worlds, above creation, outside. Now, since creation is essentially, as we just spoke about, created without Chabad, and Chabad is a gift that's given to it. That's why already in Atzilus, the source for creation is also produced in that way, that it should be a headless entity, and it receives its head as it's something that we need to accomplish. It's something that we need to bring to it. We need to draw down a head for it. So this same concept that we're learning about Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya has its origins already in Atzilus, in the part of Atzilus that's a source for Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. It also has that same dynamic. The Yedua Shezun, it is known that Zuchra Nukva, male and female of Atzilus. Hem Shoresh Dibiyah, that's the root of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. And therefore, and just like in Atzilus, the head to Zuchra V'Nukva needs to be gifted to it. It needs to be added to it. It doesn't come on its own. So in the lower 3 worlds, which they are a derivative of the Zuchra Nukva, of the male and female of Atzilus, they also operate with the same way, that they don't have a head, they don't have Chabad, and the Chabad needs to be brought in and added on. Yesh Tadir, there is what's a constant, besides Shoresh, and that's what it means when it says in Emek HaMelech, that there is what it has, that's what's called Tadir. Tadir means it never, you see, whatever is added on can be taken away, can be added or subtracted. Whatever God gave as part of the very infrastructure of that particular level, that God doesn't take away. The skeleton, God doesn't take away. The added-ons that he does, give and remove, depending on the deservance. So yesh tadir, there is constant besot shoresh, which is called shoresh. Shoresh means the root. And what is that? Rak Zayin spheres, only 7. Kenes Kiliel. However, here's the idea that all of this whole dynamic is only until we screw a head on to the world permanently. But in the days of Mashiach, at the conclusion of our work, the Chabad is going to become inherently part of the cosmos, of the cosmic order. This is so wild, because what this really says is that the entire experience of everything is going to change so dramatically. You see, to say that if God is going to add on Chachma Bina Das, he's going to add knowledge. Okay, now too, whenever we merit, we get a tzaddik like the Ari who comes to the world and blows the world apart with his knowledge. You get a tzaddik like the Baal Shem Tov who comes and brings. That's Tosefes. That's all added. But we're saying the very, very skeleton of the world is going to change. God is going to add on a new component to the skeleton of the world. It's going to become Tadir. The Chabad is going to become part of the world itself. So what kind of world is it going to be? What kind of experience is life going to be if the highest, deepest qualities of the divine building blocks, if you might say, have never been part of it, and now then it's going to become part of the world as Ula Asid, and that's what he's saying. Ula Asid in the future, Yeh Bezun, Ze'er Anpin and Malchus, in Atzilus, they are going to get a head, they're going to get a Chabad that's going to be plugged into them all the time, and that's going to become their identity. It's not even going to feel like an add-on. Gam came beside Shirish. The Ze'er, Anpin, and Malchus are going to grow ahead. They're gonna grow a new limb, a new organ, a head after everything. It's almost like till now we're headless. And then a head is going to be added to both to Malchus and to Zuch and to the male element of Atzilus. And that's going to change in the three lower worlds as well. Besides Shirish as a spheres. And it's going to become, the Shoresh is now going to become 10 spheres. Like it says in Likutei Torah of the Arizal. Oh, I knew it's not going to take long until we get a direct mention from the Ari. In Likutei Torah of the Arizal, on the verse in the pasuk of Zechariah, a pasuk, Bayomahu Yiyeh, on that day God will be. So the Arizal says, what does it mean? On that day God will be Hashem Echad Shmo Echad. So the Arizal says the word over here is Yiyeh. Yiyeh is a very important word. God's name is then going to be Yiyeh, not Yud K Vav K. Higher. Wow, it's going to be crazy. Yeah, but the jump, when I'm saying the leap is going to be so quantum. It's going to be so so why? So what's going to happen? Because Yud K Vav K, the way it is now, is Yud K, the greatest transition. Yeah. What we have now is Yud K, which Yud K we know represents Chachma and Bina. Vav K is the Ze'er Anpin and the Malchus. The Vav is the 6 emotions, and the Hey is. When Mashiach will come, the Vav is not going to be called Vav, it's going to turn into a Yud. That means that the Ze'er Anpin is going to have 10 spheros, because that's what the Yud is. So Bayoim Ahu, on that day, Yiyeh, that the Ze'er Anpin is going to have the quality of 10. It's going to be on the level of Chabad. It's going to have its own mochen that's going to be for it forever. You realize that any tiny addition on these levels, on the levels of the divine, make a complete different world, make everything change. Al came asid lavai. So all of this is going to reflect in the physical world that here as well, that the land of Israel is suddenly going to become bigger and it's going to have 10 nations. Al came asid lavai, and that's why in the future, Yekol ha'eser be'eretz Yisrael. Physically, the land of Israel, instead of it being a land of 7 nations, is going to become a land of 10 nations, because the physical dynamics, what we're seeing in the physical world, is a reflection of what's happening in the upper worlds. However, now we need to understand. Now the question becomes like this. It's an amazing explanation why Israel is going to become a land of 10 nations. But the question he asks is like this. It's not like today there isn't any mochin. Of course there is mochin. Because through the Torah and the mitzvot that we do, we draw down divine intelligence. Yet, when we add godly intelligence into the three lower worlds, the dynamics of those worlds don't change. It still remains 7 heichalos. Doesn't suddenly create a new heichal. Why is it that when Mashiach will come, it will become 10 heichalos? Now it's only 7. So you're saying because now it's not always there. Yeah. But when it's there, it's there. Yeah, we don't have another heichal for it. So what's essentially the difference? That when we add the mochin now, it doesn't cause an addition of a heichal, a new chamber to be created. And when we add the mochin, then it's going to be a new heichal. Zerampin is emotions. And since even today, through the halas man, through the work of our mitzvot, which is called the raising of the feminine waters, we draw down the chabad, the mochin, the intellectual faculties to bria, tzir, and asiya, but notwithstanding this influx and this addition. Biyah only has 7 chambers. Bria, tzira, and 7. So why is it in the Mashiach it's going to have 10? So first we need to understand what's the whole concept of heichalos. What does it mean, a heichal? A heichal literally means a hall, a chamber. What is the concept of a heichal? So in the book Torah, which is the interesting, he calls over here Lakutei Torah, Torah Or. Isn't that interesting? Because we know that Lakutei Torah was initially supposed to be the second chelek of Torah Or. The reason why, we know, I never saw this, but Torah Or chelek beis. And what he's referring to is the Amaimer on Lakutei Torah. Now, so let me just we learn almost Thursday nights all the time, the big red books that we learn over here, which are the Alter Rebbe's Maimarim on the Torah. And we know that it has 2 names. Volume number 1 is called Torah Or, and volume, which means the Torah, the light of the Torah, and volume 2 is called Lakutei Torah, a gathering of teachings. And the second, this volume 2 is on the 3 latter books of the Torah, Vayikra b'Midbar Devarim. Volume 1 is on Bereshit Shemos, on the first 2 volumes of the Torah. Why did it change? Now, initially, now here's the thing: who produced those books? The author of the book we're learning now, the grandson of the Alter Rebbe, he had it published. When he was putting it together, he called the book Torah Or, and he printed volume 1. Before we got a chance to print volume 2, the Russian government had banned the printing of Hasidic books. There was a lot of accusations against Hasidism, even to the point where the Alter Rebbe was arrested. So even after they were able to get the Alter Rebbe out, from time to time, these accusations would arise against Hasidism, and it would evoke different bans. So one of the things were they banned the publishing of these Hasidic books. So they couldn't publish. So volume 2 didn't come out till many years later. And finally, volume 2 was called, but it came out with a different name. The reason it was published with a different name was because in volume 2, the Tzemach Tzedek, the grandson of the Alter Rebbe, added his notes. He didn't want to publish it. He wanted to just put out his grandfather's books without his additions. But he had a dream that his grandfather came to him and instructed him. Grandfather had passed away already, and instructed him that he should print it with his notes. He wants his commentary, his notes. And the Tzemach Tzedek was going to ignore the dream. because he did not feel worthy that he should put his notes in the print, that he didn't want to. Until all of his sons, or three of his sons, had the same dream. And they related to the father, and when he saw that the Alter Rebbe, it means business, because he's coming to him, and when he sees he's not listening, he's going to his grandchildren, great-grandchildren, to get them to bother their father. So the Tzemach Tzedek consented, and he changed the name of the second volume, and instead of calling it Volume 2, when it's finally printed, like 11 years later, I think, something like that, instead of printing it with the name Torah or Volume 2, he called it Likutei Torah. Because Likutei Torah means a gathering, because he has his teachings there as well. So it's more of a gathering, Likutei Torah. So I never saw in the Tzemach Tzedek that he should quote Likutei Torah and call it Torah Or. In this mimer, he does. It's interesting. I don't recall seeing it. See, this itself, it was worth it for me to learn this whole mimer. In Torah Or Chelek Beis, it's just the Parsha Shlach. In Parsha Shlach, B'divrei HaMaschal Inyan HaMeraglim, in the mimer starting the Inyan HaMeraglim, U'b'divrei HaMaschal Toiva Oretz Ma'od Ma'od. There's two mimarim in Parsha Shlach, where in those two mimarim, the Alter Rebbe explains what the concept of a Heichal is. Shazehu Inyan Mashakasa B'Tkunei Zohar. It's related to what it says in Tikunei Zohar. Antu da pikas eser sfirin. God, you are the one who caused to bring forth 10 sfirot, 10 attributes, lan hagaboin almin, to conduct the worlds. The worlds, that's the idea. To the Alter Rebbe says, Ashera almin himsoid heichalos. The Alter Rebbe says, you brought forth 10 sfirot, which through the sfirot you conduct the worlds. What are the worlds? The worlds are the heichalos. So this, remember we said earlier, the spheroids are the energy. The Malchuth is what creates the actual world, the heichal. So this is that. The world itself, that's the heichal. So the chambers that we talk about are not just pure divine energy. They are already the world of the world. They're the space of the world. So you say in Olam Abriya, there is spheroids. The spheroids is the divine energy. But the heichalois, that's already the Olam, the world. Now what do we gain from it? Olam, the word Olam means helem, concealment. So what will that teach you? That heichal is related, the word heichal, chamber, is related to concealment. The creation of a world means the concealment of divinity. It's through the concealing element of the divine that creates that every world, for something to exist, God has to hide. Because if God is revealed, then the somethingness of everything dissolves in his energy, in who he is. So the concealment, the hiding of the light produces the world. So once we have that concept, then what that leads us to is that a heichal is part of the concealment, because it's synonymous with olam, with world. So he's going to explain, why does heichal, olam we know means concealment, but what does heichal have to do with concealment? So he says, well, what does a chamber do? If the people are outside picnicking on the lawn outside in the park, thousands of people, they're visible. Anybody can see them. But when the doors of the big grain chamber and hall open up and all the people that were outside all go into the hall, into the stadium, they go inward and behind the closed doors, and the doors close. So they're all concealed. All those 10,000 people that were outside, sprawled out on the lawn or doing whatever. And now they were all waiting to enter into the performance, and they go into the heichal. So to the people on the outside, they're now blocked. Whoever is in the heichal is closed by the heichal. So the heichal acts as a concealer. So the same idea is he's saying that the Hachilosi are concealing divinity, godliness. V'hainu, and he explains, Shki olam aloshen helim, that olam comes from the word concealment, shu mailom a master, that hides and conceals. U'kamoy b'chenaz bayis, and just like a house. That's interesting. I was saying that it's hiding the people from the inside. I was saying the opposite. I was saying that it's hiding the people from the inside to be seen from the outside. So if you're outside, if the people go in the house, you can't see them. But that's not the correct usage in the context that we're learning over here. It's hiding the outside from the people in the inside. Because whoever is existing in the olam doesn't see the Or Ein Sof, doesn't see the great infinite expanse. He says, in the example he gives, is that the people that are inside the house are protected from the sun. It's hiding if you're in a chamber, the sun is hidden from you. Now, it's not that there's no sun, but it has to come through the windows. There are windows that allow sunlight to get in. But without the windows, mostly, it's not like being out in the sun. The sun, in this case, would be the metaphor for God, the powerful source of energy that's flowing into all the worlds. The worlds themselves are blockages on the sun, blockages on the light. And whoever is inside the world doesn't see the light, only gets little peaks of the sun coming through the windows. So a heichal is a concealer. It creates a construct. You like that word? The construct that's inside, from within where you have a perspective of the very definitive state of existence. In this case, you experience time and space, or whatever it is. Bias, like a house that protects a person in the summer from the sun, or in the winter from the cold. But basically, it encloses an area. It hides the light that should come only through a window. Okay, so this is the same idea as heichal. Sham this bar, and over there he also explains. He takes it further. The shayrish heichalois. That's the meaning when we say heichalois in bria, yetzira, and asiya. It's a certain construct of a concealment that make up the reality of the people that are in there by blocking what is outside of this construct, what is outside of these limitations. Fine. But it says over there that the root of these heichalois, which the heichalois are the blocking entity. We know that Sephiroth and Malchuth, he says, is the heichal. Heichal is gematria Malchuth. What does Malchuth do? Malchuth blocks the light from being revealed. Malchuth is a massive filter, like we learned so many times. But v'shoyrish heichalois, the root of these heichals, nimshach, they're drawn mipchinas igulim. They come from a very lofty place. In other words, although as they manifest over here, they are a force of concealment and a hiding, and therefore creating an otherness, in a sense, a disconnect from God to a certain extent. But in their source, they're sourced in the concept, the heichal, that is a blocker, is sourced on a very, very lofty level. From the level of igulim. Igulim mean the circles. Which means the concept of these igulim is that the influence is still in a level of makif. Ala makabel to the recipient. The Eina Meir b'pchenes gili mamish, and it's not shining to him in a revealed way. So what does that mean? So those that have, I'm expecting everybody that listens to these classes on Thursday night to join us for the Elokus channel that we do a half an hour every day. For those of you that haven't noticed that class, it's called the Elokus podcast. So over there, we're really, 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 really going through everything in a very detailed, structured manner. But for those of you who haven't, and even for those that have, obviously we need explanation over here. the way the mystics explain the evolution of creation at its very, 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 very initial stages is that initially there was pure infinite light that was revealed and that was present, and the infinite light did not allow a possibility for anything to exist. So Hashem hid that infinite light. And when Hashem hid the infinite light in where within a circle, he kind of sucks in his light, right? He sucks it in, pulls it back into himself from within a certain, the way the Kabbalists talk about, a round circular area. So inside is a big empty black hole in the midst of his infinite revelation. And that already is your first circle. What's the circle? Not the black hole, but the light that's surrounding the black hole, the Or Ein Sof that is not entering the space of the circle, but is surrounding the circle. That's your first circle. That's your first igul. Igul means circles. Then what happens? Into the black hole, Hashem introduces a thread, a ray of light, a beam of light. And when that beam enters the void, you know what it does, the Kabbalists say? It immediately, let's just picture it. It goes down an inch, and then within the space, I mean, if I would make it on a paper, that's what I would do. I would go down an inch. And in this descent, once it's in the space of what was once the void, or in the void 1 inch down, it then expands into a circle. It circles itself into another circle. Now, this circle is smaller than the outer circle because it's contained inside the circle. Then it descends, the line, the beam of light descends another inch and circles another circle. And then another inch and a circle, and so on and so forth. These circles are called igulim. And the way it says in the Arizal even uses the terms like the layers of an onion. When you peel an onion, you have one circle and then another circle inside it and another circle. My holy women that come to my shir, when they're going to peel onions and make whatever that is, they're going to be thinking about igulim. That's the way you're supposed to do it in the days of Mashiach. When you're slicing onions and you're peeling away the outside and you're cutting under the inside, you see all these igulim, you see all these encircling of the Or Ein Sof, taking circle after circle. Now, what's the idea of the circle? So now what we have over here is a dynamic of two different things. We have circles and we have the beam. I'm not getting into a long explanation because I want you to come study with me the Allowance channel. We have 46. If you didn't start yet, you have 46 classes to catch up. So, but over there we discussed the concept as follows. What we've created over here is a contrast between two energies. The beam and the circle. The beam and the circle. The beam keeps on moving forward, or the thread, the kav, the line and circle. The horizontal line and the circles that come forth. So the difference between these two energies are, the line is called Or Pnimi. It's meant to go into vessels. It gets narrower and narrower and narrower. The circles are a Makif light. Makif means an encompassing energy. So which level is usually higher? So here, let's understand something. The beam in the inch above the circle, see, the circle is hanging on the circle is hanging on the thread. So the part of the thread that's in between circle A and circle B is higher than circle B. The energy is higher because it's still above circle B. But circle B is higher, its light is brighter than the beam when it goes from circle B to circle C. Because when it's dramatically reduced from circle to circle. So the Or Pnimi that's going further down to the next level, the internal light, is much less than the circle that happened before. It's almost like the energy first needs to encircle, and then it could continue and go inside that space. Then it creates a circle. It cordals off a certain area. It circles the area, and then it can deliver a shot of a beam. The beam light is meant to be a light that is more addressing the limitations of the next level. The encompassing light is more a expansive light. It's like a teacher that's teaching a student, that when you're teaching, sometimes you're going to say something, you know the student isn't going to understand, but you're saying it as an introduction. You're trying to take the student and put him in a certain world, in a certain headspace. And then once they're there, even though they're not understanding what you're saying, but they're like, and then from that space you can contract the idea and give them that which they're able to internalize. So what he's saying is an interesting thing. The igulim are very lofty. These are the encircling energies, the Makif. But they are the source for the Hachilosi that happen later in creation. What are the Hachilosi? The chambers of each world. The actual space, which we said before, is a concealer. But hold it. If the Hachilosi are a concealment on God and a block on God, how can they be rooted in this lofty revelation of Igulim? Igulim is such a powerful revelation. Igulim is revelation, not concealment. No. Since the eagle is an Makif, it's an encompassing light, which means it's a concealment because the student can't grasp it. It's still too lofty. It's an encircular energy. So it too is a concealment. But over there, it's a concealment, not because it's blocking. It's concealed because it's too high. There's two levels of concealment. One way of concealing something is I'm hiding something from you. Another way of concealing is I'm crashing you with information. I'm not hiding, but that too is a concealment. Because it's crashing you and you can't handle it, the concept remains above you. You see, there's two opposite concealments. God forbid you can blind someone by poking them in the eye and they can't see, or you can blind someone by giving them too much light and that blinds them. So what he's saying is the Hachilosi are an actual, it's a blinding. It's actually a block. It's something blocking. But their root comes from the igulim that are blinding light, which is Makif. It's so high and too lofty for it to be received and understood. And that evolves and produces the Hachilosi. Visham, this Baron over there in the Mimer explains the Shoyrish Hachilosi is the root of the chambers. Nimshach mepchenes igulim comes from these circles, Shumasha Hashpa, which is this that the influence ubepchenas Makif adayin is still over the head. It's encompassing. Ala makabel on the recipient. The Einay Meir bepchenes gilim mamish. And it's not shining and illuminating in a revealed way. And therefore, from the concept of a concealment, notwithstanding the fact that the reason it's a concealment is because it's too bright, but still it creates the notion of a concealment. From that is later derived the Hachilosi that are real blockers. Comes from them, the Hachilosi, that they are also ma'alimim, they also are concealing and obscure. What's the mimer? Shin Hey? Shir Amalis. In the end of the mimer of Shir Amalis, Hayinu kecholmim, the concept of tapping this world of igulim The concept of having something that's low, that's rooted in a very, very high place. Well, that's what we're really explaining over here. That there is a state that is really low and dark, but it's rooted in a very high place. The Hachilosi, they are low because they're blockages, and they form time and space. They block the godly. They block the divine. But they're rooted in a superior level of divine revelation in the Igulim. So there the Alter Rebbe gives an amazing illustration to this idea. He says dreams. When a person is dreaming, you are in a very, very compromised state of intelligence. When a person is awake, then their mind is operating in a very clear manner. When you're asleep, everything is distorted, and you dream. And the dream most of the time is foolish things, silly things. But one of the interesting, striking things about a dream is that you can dream things that are impossible to be. In other words, the mind, because the rational, reasonable mind is not filtering when you're sleeping. The mind needs a rest. So the mind is kind of out for lunch break. So the imagination takes over. And when the imagination takes over, it runs wild because it doesn't have a overseer. It doesn't have a manager that keeps the head in space, in the right space. So it runs and it produces all kinds of ridiculous things. So much so that sometimes you can see something that when you wake up, it was actually an impossibility. Two things that cannot go together, and yet they're together. And in the dream it works. So why is that? So it says an interesting thing. And we also know that in dreams, people a lot of times get information that we're told certain mysteries and hidden things that we don't get in when we're awake. You can be a very holy person, have a great mind, and try to know things, and you don't know it. But you went to sleep, and it was revealed to you in a dream. That means that when you're dreaming, you're tapping something very lofty. So it says, you know where the root of dreams are? The root of dreams are in the igulim, in the circles. Because they're in the circles represent infinity. And infinity, everything is possible. Opposites are possible. So when you're dreaming, you're treated to a touch of these igulim. Now, obviously, you can go into dark igulim, of very, 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 very dark places of the Klipa and the Sitra Achra. Not just because not every dream is holy. If you go to sleep holy, and you make the proper preparation, and you keep yourself. So it's holy people go into holy igulim. But even when you're not holy, you still go into igulim. You can go into the igulim of the Sitra Achra, God forbid, where it can show you ridiculous things that also don't make any sense, but yet you're dreaming them. But the point being over here is that you see that even though dream is a concealment, in a certain way, it's rooted, you're tapping your imagination, which is above your intellect, above the filter of your mind. You're tapping energies of your soul that are like kind of much bigger than the narrowness of the conscious, constricted, rational thinking mind. Which has two opposites. It comes from these circles. You see, in the circle, because the circles are infinite, the point of a circle is, in a circle, there's no up and down. Everything in the circle is equal. Because there's no top of the circle, no bottom of the circle. There's no right side or left side. Everything in the circle is really, in a line, there's the top, there is the bottom. But in a circle, it's all equal. So what does that mean? It's a spiritual level which is beyond divisibility. Things are not yet divided, sectioned. Everything is fluid in the circle. Nothing is fixed and rigid and set in a particular state. So this lofty level of an energy that's pre-divisibility, so high, nislapsha lamata, but becomes enclosed down here, bedavar shalamata mischalkas. In other words, something very, very high, lofty, and level of energy that is so high, since it's essentially beyond division, which is not a world that we live in, because we live in a world already of sections, of limitation. So if God wants to introduce us to his infinite possibility where things are beyond definition, he can't do it in our rational thinking mind. He needs to sneak around the barriers of our brain and give it to us when we are in a state of lower than intelligence. You see, when we're sleeping, there is no question that our mind is compromised. We are in a weaker state of the human. We are in a diminished state. True. And if we're in a diminished state, we are less a vessel for something special and great. But yet, notwithstanding the fact that we are in a less vessel, it's the only vessel that we have for something that is utterly outside of our stratosphere, something that's totally beyond, because it cannot enter into the fixed, limited human mind that needs to define everything. It needs to sneak around, so it will go. Basically, the world of the impossible enters into our reality and our silliness, not in our smartness. When you're dreaming, you're being silly. But in that silliness, God can insert messages from an impossible world. So everybody that's dreaming, no matter who you are, you're in a silly state because your mind is resting. So now you're being silly. But that silliness, and what's the difference between being smart and silly? Smart people see things the way they really are, set things in their right. Silliness means you're confusing things. You're connecting things that don't have a relationship. You're not seeing the borders and the boundaries clearly. That's being silly. Yes, so that's an inferior state, but little crumbs of what's beyond intelligence can enter into that state. And that's why in that silliness we can experience, it says a dream is a small prophecy. Now, when we're awake, if you're a prophet, you can experience prophecy when you're awake. If you're not a prophet, then the closest you can get to prophecy is when you're dreaming. Why? Because you're entering the world of igulim. So the Hachilosi, that's the same idea that he's saying. So what happens? What that really means is that our limited, constricted, blocked world, our limited, constricted, blocked world is really rooted, because that's the Hechal. Our reality is based on Hachilosi, is really rooted in very, very lofty levels of impossibility. And that's the reason why we have so much opportunity when we're living in the physical material world, locked in the chambers of time and space. We have access to energies that are so high. We can do mitzvahs. We can move things. Because the Hachilosi are really rooted in igulim, where there is the impossible. So we can do impossible things in our world based on, not just in our world, in worlds in general, in Hachilosi, in chambers. So chambers on the one hand are very limiting, but on the other hand, which means you're much better off if you're not in the chamber. If you're a free soul that's not contained in a chamber, you're floating above the chambers, you're free, you have much greater expansive vision. But you only have connection to the indwelling light, to the Or Pnimi. You're not touching the circles. In order to touch the circles, you need to go into the concealment. You need to go into a body. You need to go into a world. You need to go into the infrastructures, into the Hachilosi. And on the one hand, you're severely compromised. On the other hand, it's precisely there because these Hachilosi come from the Igulim. That's why opportunity is so great when we are in the concealing elements of life. When we're in a body, when we're in this world. Because this is similar, because when we go into a body, we're almost like we're like living a silly dream. But in the dream, you have access. It explains the same things that exile. Exile is when we enter into a dream. We enter, our minds shut down, and we go into a dreamlike state. But in the exile, we're able to do things so much greater than when we weren't in exile. When we were in the time of the temple and we had our spiritual powers were so turned on and so maximized, but we were kind of limited. But when we dropped into exile and into concealment, into the dream world, that's where all the potency and all the power is of the Igulim. That's why the world of Mashiach comes after such a long exile. So things are never what they seem like. That's the cool thing that we learn over here. Which is the dream. This is similar to the idea of Islapshus. It's similar to the concept that an enclothement of something that is beyond das, will enclose itself only in something that is below das, below the mind. Kamoi, as it explains in Chassidus, why can you offer an animal and bring atonement on a human? In the temple service was with animals. They would sacrifice an animal, bring atonement for a human. An animal is a far inferior creature to the human. So by offering an animal, how does it bring an atonement for the human? So it's explained that the animal that doesn't have das, doesn't have intelligence, is rooted, the source of it is higher than the human. Because the human, no matter how great his intelligence is, it's intelligence. It has a limit. Intelligence always has a limit. The non-intelligence of the animal is rooted in what's called the great animal that's higher than the supernal human. The great animal means a place that's beyond intellect because it's infinite. Like the root of an animal is from Behema Rabbah, that's beyond intelligence. That's higher than Atzilus. Over there it explains also why food has so much power. Food that comes from plants, like wheat. And we say that through eating wheat, a baby, the Talmud says a baby does not know how to articulate father or mother unless the baby eats. When the baby's nursing, it can't really say that. But when the baby starts tasting the taste of wheat, it can do so. And the reason, now what that means, that somehow the wheat gives it wisdom. How can wheat, which is just a plant, and the answer is, it's the same idea. What is lower is rooted higher. V'zeu inyan albis shamayim. And that's the meaning of the verse that it says, God says, I will dress the heavens, kadros, with darkness. God says, I dress the heavens with darkness. Simply, we can understand that you're standing outside, it's a beautiful blue sky, and suddenly very, very dark clouds come rolling out and they cover the heavens. That means God is dressing the heaven with darkness. But the deeper meaning over here is as follows. Shamayim, heaven, is symbolic on the igulim, on the circles, because heaven space is round. The galaxy is all round. So the heaven represents igulim, which is very, very lofty. But what derives from the igulim? Where do the igulim, what eventually is a derivative from the igulim? The olamos, the worlds, the hechalos, the chambers, which the chambers are a real concealment. That's the meaning. I'm dressing the heavens, which are the igulim, kadros, with darkness. The heavens are not dark. The heavens are light beyond light, blinding light. And from them comes kadros, concealment, which are the concealment of the hechalos, the chambers. Now, the chambers, let's make sense. The chambers are not dark places in the higher worlds. The chambers are where everything is going on. All the parties are inside the chambers. You want to get into chamber after chamber. But when we say it's a concealment, we mean that it's a concealment on the infinite. Because if you're beyond the chamber, then you would be exposed to the infinity of God. The chambers are blocked at infinite, but that whatever is trickling into the chamber is tremendous godly experience. So again, in Yishal b'shamayim shemigulim kadrois darkness, b'chinas choshech, which is darkness, ta'aynu kecholmim ayin sham. It's the concept that from the igulim come the dreams, like we said earlier. This is the idea that the igulim dwells on the heichal. The chambers, they obscure and they hide. Now, these chambers, as they exist in the higher worlds, they have a lot of windows and they let a lot of light in. But as these chambers come down lower and lower and lower, evolve into our world, they're windowless chambers. And they cut us off completely from the divine experience. And we look at nature as nature. We look at the world just as the world, time and space as absolutes, and our realities as fixed and unbudgeable. And that's our state. Nimshach mezehelim gomer comes complete concealment. Choshech olam hazeh, the darkness of this world. Chenes hayinu kecholmim, to the point that we are like dreamers in this world, which is we don't have clarity. Our signs we don't see. Shina, it's a time of sleep. But always remember that the darker it is, the root of the darkness is always from a much higher place. Is from the circular levels of Seviv Kalalman, of the encompassing lights. It's precisely from the most loftiest levels of God's infinite light that produce the yesh, produce the substance of the material of the physical world that is totally ignorance from God. Now, he references a discourse we learned this year, Purim. Remember when we learned Sharei Oira, the book of the Mittler Rebbe, before Purim, a long mimer. And the beginning of the mimer, he was talking about the concealment of the physical world, that matter itself is created from higher than everything else, from the infinite. We discussed this, exactly this point. Hishavus hayesh v'davar nifrat comes from K'moshe b'divrei hamaschil yaviu levush malchus. That's the mimer we learned. V'ayim hashakasav al-pasik chanukas habayis l'David, being a levush bayis, v'ayim be'etz chaim sharmem aleph b'divrei hamaschil in levushim ve'echolois, shehem batim, these are called homes. So what does it say in Tikkun Zohar? Going back to what it says in the Zohar, that God emanated 10 Sephiroth la'anhaga omen, to lead the worlds. What does that mean? The worlds are concealments and blockages, and our job is to brighten up these concealed worlds. La'anhaga. Now, and when we brighten them, they're much brighter than the brightest. Then what is? To conduct the worlds. To take the concealment and reveal the superior light that's in the concealment. as it says in the future, it says your teacher will not hide from you anymore. Your master will not hide from you. God won't be hidden anymore. It's through our work that we work by turning away from bad, and doing good. When we fight our concealment, our sluggishness, our laziness, our depression, our heaviness, our negative impulses, desires, whatever they are, when we overcome these and we break through and remain connected, and not only remain connected, but deepen our connection to Hashem, notwithstanding the darkness of exile and the darkness of the material world and the darkness of our body and the darkness of our dark psyche, and we fight and our animal soul and all this stuff. And what do we do? Lahapach, to convert. Helam nefesh bahamis, the concealment of our animal soul. For a lot of about this, listen to yesterday's class. We did a major discussion about the animal soul and about the human experience of this battle and all this. V'haguf, and the body, you realize that the final product of concealment that traces its way back to the hecholos, that traces its way back to the igulim, to the powerful infinite lights of God. Remember, the igulim produce the hecholos. The hecholos in the spiritual world. The hecholos, the chambers in the spiritual world, are the source of the chambers of lower worlds, and the chambers in the lower worlds eventually evolve into the chambers of this world, which include also the chambers of klipas noga, of the shells of noga, the unholy chambers, which is the root of our evil inclination and animal soul and all these concealing factors. It's all layer after layer. The final result is, and when we tinker with and change and break through the concealments of the final product that came about through all these concealments, we light up the entire chain, the entire evolution of all worlds, all the way to its very, very beginning. We reveal the source in everything, and suddenly we find ourselves bathing and basking in the infinite boundlessness of God's light. That's the transformation. And the work is now. And we only have seconds left still to finish work. The clock is ticking. We have seconds left because Mashiach is coming already any moment. And the light is coming. The Guf HaMenshachem, the Klipas Noiga that come from the chambers of Klipas Noiga. Shemehelim HaYoser Gas, this is the most thickening, darkest, thick density of concealment. And this is what it says, that God, it says in the verse, I think it's in Job, or maybe in Kehelas, it says, also the world God gave into their hands, into their hearts. And the meaning is that God put into every human heart the entire cosmic order. But the deeper meaning is, Olam means even the concealment God put into our hearts. We can certify the concealment, or we can remove the concealment. We can go along with the concealment and, God forbid, add more concealment. Or we can fight. Just remembering that moment. We can fight and break through the concealments. And when we break through the concealments, we brighten up the concealing elements of all worlds. Through this, that we overcome our own animalistic self. And we conquer it, tachas nefesh elikis, under the domain of our illuminating soul, our godly soul. We compel our animal side to live in accordance to our godly higher consciousness. Al yedei ze nimshach l'mayla, this causes above as well. We cause God's glory that is concealed in the worlds. That's what worlds means, concealment, that his glory permeates, penetrates, and breaks into the concealing worlds and reveals itself from its loftiest, highest levels of revelation. because our godly soul is above the concealment. Our godly soul comes from the 10 spheros of Yosher, which is the, remember, the source of the concealment is the circulars. Remember we said like a teacher that gives an idea to the student, but it's a concealing. It's meant to set the tone, but it's still a concealment because the student doesn't get it. So we said earlier that the igulim is the source, is eventually the source of concealment, but the thread is the source of revelation, the source of Gilui. So the Nefesh Elokis, the godly soul that we have, is a product and a derivative from the thread of light. It's a beam of light. Our godly soul is part of the beam, the 10 Sephiroth of the world of Yosher, which is revelation. By us overpowering our soul, which is the soul of revelation, over the concealments, dominating our soul, not allowing the concealments to swallow us, but to constantly every day seek the thread of light that's inside of us. So each and every one of us has, our soul is a thread, it's a beam. God, when we wake up in the morning, God has ready for us a little beam of light that's ready. He's only asking us to search for it. So when we wake up and we start looking for that beam of light through prayer or whatever, we wake up in the right way instead of, looking at the news the first thing in the morning. You wake up and you learn Torah and you go pray. You activate your soul. You look for that light, for that beam of light, and you illuminate your darkness. What that does is it makes the lights of the Kav illuminate into all the igulim, into all the hechalos. And then you reveal in the hechalos itself their source in the igulim, which is even higher than the godly soul. We know that the animal soul really has, the animal soul in the body has even greater light hidden in it than the godly soul. But it is helpless, it can't fix itself. You need the godly soul to fix the animal soul, and then the animal soul and the body have brighter light than even the godly soul, because they come from the igulim. They come from the concealing element, which concealment, the concealment of dark, of blinding light, where the light is higher than revelation. And yet that too is revealed. So that's the idea. Because the godly is called the Yosher, comes from the 10 spheres of Yosher, which is revelation. In other words, God gave each and every one of us a point that is not concealed. It's so amazing. Unintentionally, I literally spoke about all of this last night in this really highly recommended to listen to, because the last night's class was far more down to earth. I wasn't teaching a mimer, so I was able to talk more, and we spoke about the idea that although we're living in an animalistic self and so on, but we all have a redeeming factor, because we all have a higher consciousness, a soul that's within us that is always bright. It's just we just have to pay attention. She talks very softly, the soul, and she's not loud, and she doesn't have a megaphone. So we have to silence things to listen in. But when we listen in, we can open up and stay the course and brighten up our life. And when we do that, we convert the darkness to an even brighter light than our soul. That's the idea that he's explaining over here. Adam Yashar, that the human being comes from the word of Yashar. Yashar is direct light, not from the Makifim. The Efshe Shalachene Echolois. And the Efshe, now we can say, based on all of this, why the Echolois are only 7 and not 10. Because since the chambers are what? The chambers, as we learned earlier, are meant to create the infrastructure of concealment. And the Chabad, Chachma Bina Das, means revelation. That's why the Adam, the human being, who is an entity, the human soul, the human spirit, and the human inside of us, which is our godly soul, not our animal soul. The animal soul is the animal inside of us. But the human inside of us, as we learn in Tanya, its main power is that it has chabad, it has intellectual ability. It has intelligence. Intelligence is brightness. So you can't, from brightness does not become concealment. From revelation, since the whole idea of a Heichal is a concealment, you can't have another 3 chambers for the Chabad, because Chabad, the Chachma bin Adas, is revelation. It doesn't create concealment. The emotions could, since their emotions are in the dark, emotions, that's why the emotional energy is good energy to create a concealment. But intellectual energy is luminous and revealing, and over there's no concealment. And that's why the chambers are Rak Zion only 7. Neged Zion Spherois corresponding to the 7 Spherois. Because there's more concealment. When the first 3 are shining, when the Chabad is shining, there's no concealment. Because Chachma is called light. Chachma is called light. And Bina and Das, because they are a continuation of Chachma, there is also too much light over there. So where there is light, there's no concealment, there's no Heichal. That's why the sages say, the verse says, that a fool goes in darkness. What does that mean? That foolishness is darkness. Where there is light, there is illumination, there is clarity. There's no foolishness. So the whole concept of a construct that obscures and hides the truth, that's a product of concealment. That creates concealment, and it's related to concealment. Where there is revelation of Mochen, it doesn't exist. Eitz Chaim, Shermam Aleph, Perik Dalid, and in Eitz Chaim, this is from the Arizal, Portal 41, 4th chapter, Mashma, She'af Ba'atzilus Yesh Hechalos. Even though primarily Hechalos, chambers, are generally spoken only in the 3 lower worlds, in Atzilus, we usually don't talk about Heichal. There's Spherois, but not Heichalos. But in Eitz Chaim, and it seems to imply that in Atzilus, there's also Heichalos. And in Atzilus, the Heichalos are also only 7. Because the concept of a Heichal is concealment. And the first 3 don't lend themselves for concealment because they're illumination. That's why it's important. There's only concealment in your life when you don't study Torah. When you study Torah and you introduce Chabad, there is no concealment. That's why the most important thing in our lives is constantly to have Torah study. Even in Atzilus, there's chambers. It's only 7. That's the question. He's proving is an interesting thing. You see, in Bria, we said, in Bria, Yetzir, and Asiya, there's only 7. The makeup of the 3 lower worlds is only of the 7 spheres. The Chachma bin Adas, we said earlier, is not really the makeup of the 3 lower worlds. So over there we understand there's only 7 chambers. But in Atzilus, which all 10 spheres are shining, so why is there only 7 chambers? The answer is because in the Chabad of Atzilus, they can't, even though there is in that world, there is Chabad, there is Chachma bin Adas. Well, in the area of Chabad, there is no Heichal. The Heichalos can only be in the emotions where there is a lessening of the light. That's when there can be a chamber that evolves, that is produced. That's a block on the light. That's a concealment. Now he asks a question that I didn't understand when I was looking at it earlier. I mean, I understand the question. I don't understand the answer. But you're going to ask a question. Hold it. We said before that the root of the chambers are eventually from the, if you trace them all the way back, are from the circles that are in the Ein Sof. And how many circles are there? There are 10 circles. We spoke about the onion, the one inside the other. There are 10 of them. So if the Yegulim are 10, then the Heichalos which come from the circle, should also be 10 heichals. There's 10 spherois of igulim. And therefore, because the igulim, it's very important. The igulim themselves are not darkness. The igulim are ultimate light. When we're saying that where there is light, where there is light, there cannot be a chamber. That applies to the chambers. Because the chambers are worlds that the meaning of the world is a block of light, a concealment of light. A world that doesn't allow the sunlight to come in. There's walls that is blocking. We were only saying that the root of these worlds are from a very lofty light that is so bright that it's beyond the recipient. That's why it's also a concealment to the recipient, but not a concealment to itself. So that's why like this. The igulim themselves have no problem with a lot of light. Quite on the contrary, their whole idea is that they are so much light. So in the igulim, there can be 10. There can be Chabad igulim. But in the concealments that come from it, over there can only be 7, because the Chabad, the definition of Chabad is revelation. That's the whole idea of Chachma. Chachma, intelligence means clarity and revelation, and that directly contradicts and conflicts with concealment. I didn't understand this line when I looked at it earlier, and now the igulim are above the kav, above the narrow line. They're even higher than. In other words, the kav is revelation. The igulim is even super revelation. It's higher v'hischalkus k'niskaliel. So it's no question how come the igulim can have 10. The chambers, however, cannot be formed from a intellectual revelation. Where there's revelation, there is no chamber. However, notwithstanding the fact that we mentioned that in Atzilus, however, there is also chambers, but there's only 7, and not the main talk in the mystical books about chambers is not an Atzilus. Because in general, the entire world of Atzilus is full of light, and therefore you can't really talk about chambers. If there are chambers there, the chambers are so subtle that you don't notice even the chambers. That's why the Zohar doesn't even talk about chambers in Atzilus. Because the general rule of Atzilus is it's a very bright world. And where there is brightness, there is no chamber. So Makom b'Zohar u'b'Pardes, in the book of Zohar and in Pardes, Nisker Heichalois Rak B'Biyah, is the chambers are only mentioned and only spoken of in Bria, Yatzir, and Asir. Now behold, now just like there are 7 chambers, in which our job is that into these 7 chambers we have to illuminate it. Right? What did we learn? That a chamber is a concealment, but our job is through working with overpowering our own and our animal soul and body and all of the darknesses that we have in our life, just the physical world and the exile and all these are all chambers after chambers after chambers that kind of cut us off from seeing the ultimate reality that is the reality of everything. And our job within ourselves is to overpower it with our soul that is an entity of light to break through. And that's how we cause on the cosmic level for God's light to break through into these chambers. So that's on the individual level, each and every one of us. And on the collective level, the Jewish people are given the land of 7 nations, which represent the 7 chambers. 7 cosmic chambers that make up the existence of the entire world were manifested in the land of the 7 nations, who lived in that land? Pagan people who were completely blocked detached from godliness. And our job was to go in there, take over that land, and illuminate it, so that we can transform the entire world with light. Kach nitan liYisrael, so too was given to the Jewish people, Eretz Shiva Amimim, the land of the 7 nations. Shulahapech, this is to convert, ulevarer, and to purify, Hashiva midas arois, the 7 negative emotions. Hanim shachen mehechalois the klipas noiga. It says that these 7 nations correspond to the 7 negative emotions. Well, that we have to, each nation personified, that each of the ancient nations that lived in the land of Israel was particularly, they were all corrupted. They were all very, very, very corrupted people. But each nation had a particular outstanding corruption, what they were corrupted in. There was one nation that was corrupted in their love. They had very, 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 very misinformed, misguided, corrupted love. And there was a nation that had corrupted compassion. And there was a nation that had corrupted victory and perseverance, and so on and the like. Each nation had its corruption in a particular emotion. And when the Jews went into the land, they faced these corrupted entities in their own animal soul, in their own experience. And they had to cleanse it internally. It wasn't just conquering land. It was an inside battle. Now, these 7 unholy emotions in the human experience, they come from, they don't just, nothing starts in our world. Everything comes from the higher realms. So our negative feelings and emotions when we're feeling depressed or down, it's being fed to us through a channel, to our chambers of klipas noga, of the klipa. And that's where our anger starts. That's where our lust starts. That's where our I might say the sadness starts, heaviness, fears, whatever it is that is resentment, or all these negative entities that we go through, that we don't even realize it. That there's energies all around us. We walk into a different store, we walk into a place, there's energies depending on the people that are there, the owner, the person who lives there, the people who work there, the city. It all creates, from the spiritual worlds, everything evolves. The people that walked here yesterday left a trace of their energies in this place, and channeling what they channeled into a place. Tzaddikim that are very sensitive, they can tell if someone unholy was in a place because they feel it. They feel the stench. So what that really means is that now today's days, it's a million times worse, because it used to be that you were impacted by just the environment, just by walking on the street, what was there, and it was constantly speaking to you. The spiritual worlds are speaking through the physical world. Fine. But you're getting negative energy through a thorn bush. Okay, what can you get through that? But today's days, it started with the introduction of radios, so you can turn the channel to the FM or the AM and to this, and basically it's feeding you your consciousness. Instead of being free to think to you to project your consciousness, you're being fed by whatever entertainment you're getting. Then the television happened, completely is channeling its absolute shtus, what we might say absolute filth and stupidity and meaninglessness, into the contaminating the human mind with whatever garbage that's there. And then the internet starts, in which we don't put it down for 2 minutes. So what's really happening is we're introducing into ourselves non-stop channels of what's being fed. And we don't realize how powerfully psychologically it's affecting us. If you tune into Torah, you're tuning into the holy chambers, and you're allowing the Torah to guide your. But if you're tuning into to YouTube, unless you're listening to our channel, or then you're just, it's these energies that are flowing. So what he's saying is that the 7 emotions are drawn from chambers of klipa, from these chambers. Would these chambers come from high? Now, ultimately, the chambers are filled with singing angels that are but it's already a concealment. And from one concealment evolves the next concealment and the next concealment and the next concealment and the next, till it becomes dark worlds with dark experiences, and they all flow. All those energies flow down. It's like when all the creeks are flowing into the river and eventually make its way down into the ocean. Everything flows down into our world. Our world is the bottom bowl where everything flows into. And we're the ultimate recipient. But our job is, so when the Jewish people went into the land of Israel, which is the sum totality of the 7 nations which were receiving from the 7 impure Hachilosi, when the Jews went in there, they had to turn these chambers into holy chambers. And this creates, we convert these negative chambers into 7 holy chambers, which is the holy land of Israel. How does that happen? And when we convert, and the whole excitement of God, what God derives pleasure from, is from this transformation of darkness to light. And when we convert the darkness of our 7 emotions, or in the land of Israel, we take the land of the nations and turn it into a holy Jewish land, what happens is, it says when darkness is converted to light, when the Sitra Achra, when the other side is subdued, the glory of God rises in all worlds. Almin, it means that all the Hachilosi, from the beginning to the end, it's suddenly illuminated with bright light. Why? Because really the root of the Hachilosi are what? What's the root? Where does it all begin? In the circles. And the circles are infinite light. So when we take the darkness of the Hachilosi and we break through with light, suddenly the circles light up. And it produces this infinity, this boundless light in the world, which will be fully manifest in Mashiach, in our physical world that caused it all. The glory of God rises Bekula Alman in all worlds. And what does that mean? Hainu Hamshachas Gimel Rishonos Keser Chachma Bina. And the illumination of God's glory in the worlds means we bring light into the worlds. What are the lights? Oh, I was saying we reveal the source of the darkness itself. That's explained in other places. But right now, I misspoke, because right now he's saying that the Yistalik Yekara de Kutrabrichu is that we introduce light into these dark chambers. What's the light? We said earlier, the first 3, that's the Mochen, that's what's brought into the darkness. And Hainu Hamshachas Gimel Rishonos, we draw down the first 3, Keser Chachma and Bina. See, as I mentioned many times, in a certain system of Kabbalah, we don't count the first 3 as Chachma, Bina, Das. Instead, we count the first 3 as Keser, Chachma, and Bina. And that's the 3 that we draw forth. Suddenly, these dark chambers become permanently illuminated. So there is the little bit of insertions of light that we give it now, currently, when we battle and we infuse. Simply, it means when we add holy intellectual enlightenment into our dark emotions. See, emotions are dark. They creep up on us and they want to take us down. And we have to stop for a moment and say, this is my emotion. This is what I feel right now. This is my darkness. Now, what am I going to use to add light into that? That's what did I learn? What did I learn? That I have some illumination. I have in my suitcase of knowledge. I have knowledge that can illuminate this darkness. So you take out that light and you shine it into the darkness. That chamber has now become illuminated with mochen. And when a person does that, it causes that to happen in the whole general realm of Hachilosi, that the Gimel Rishonos are shining. Now the Gimel Rishonos illuminate a shot of light, but they don't remain there, because it remains 7 Hachilosi. And in Mashiach's days, we add on another 3 countries because it's permanently affixed. The Hachilosi are permanently illuminated with the Mochin of the Gimel Rishonos. It's similar to what is explained in the Maimer Basi Legani through the study of Torah. Mamshichen, we draw down Mochen. Remember, we said earlier, we give God a head. We give Mochen to the Ze'er Anpin. We build its Mochen through studying Torah. On its own, it doesn't have Mochen. We give it the Mochen through studying Torah. But when we bring the Mochen down into the Ze'er Anpin is lacking Mochen. The 6, remember we said earlier, the emotions above the structure of Ze'er Anpin is lacking the on its own, the way it was designed from its very infrastructure is only emotions. Similar to what we said that in the worlds, there's only 7 spheros, not the intellect. The intellect needs to be infused. That's our work, to infuse. But when we bring Mochen down, how does now watch, when a baby is born, when a baby is born, they're also born without Mochen, without intelligence. Emotions are kind of like already, you can notice in little babies, as soon as they're born, they have already an emotional capacity. They already want something. They love, they like being fed. They're upset when something hurts them. They're uncomfortable. Emotions are there already from a very, very, they're kind of built in. But the intellect needs to be developed. And how does it develop? It develops in increments. First, there is the nursing stage, which is a certain level of intelligence that comes through the mother's milk. That's called Mochen Diyanika, the Mochen of nursing. And after that, eventually, you get Mochen de Gadlus, the broad Mochen. And the child gets older and I think there's 3 levels, Yanika, and then Mochen de Katnus, and then Mochen de Gadlus. I think there's 3 levels. Over here, he speaks mainly of 2. The Mochen de Yanika, the lower level. The Achakach Mochen de Gadlus, and afterwards the broad Mochen. Asher Mochen de Yanika, hu aseichel shalamida. The idea of the nursing emotions, the lower emotions that initially are added on, are emotions, are intelligence that are meant to illuminate the emotions. Which means they're in an inferior level of intelligence. They're intelligence that are meant to guide our emotions. But as we mature, we get to experience transcendental intelligence that's beyond the guide for the emotions. It's knowledge for the sake of knowledge. It's not just so I should know how to feel, but it's beyond that. Higher mochen, it's not so much the reason of the emotion to inform the emotion, but even higher. That the Ze'er Anpin should have the expansive mochen itself. And that's the reason why, watch this amazing, now we'll understand why Israel is called the land of milk and honey. The land itself is the land of 7 nations, so it's the emotional structure. And the milk and the honey that flows in it, the milk is the nursing. You nurse into the emotions. You nurse it with milk. That's the nursing emotions. That's to illuminate the emotions and illuminate the dark life of emotional life, and to guide it with objective reality, with truths that are bigger than what the emotions feel naturally. That's the milk. Honey represents already the expansive mochen, not the, we know for children, the worst thing, one of the very dangerous for little babies is to give them honey, because they're not ready for mochen de gadlus. You have to give them milk. So the land of Israel flows milk and honey, means that to the to the which really is, you realize, to the entire construct of time and space of our world, which is built on the seven, we're adding intelligence. But it's primarily happening in the land of Israel. And from the land of Israel, it affects the entire cosmic order. To bring higher illumination. We nurse the seven emotions with milk. This is the nursing emotions. This is what we do after Pesach. We begin to nurse. Sfiras Omer is the nursing period, the period of counting the Omer. Shavuos is when God gives us the Torah. That's already the honey. That's much higher. But the honey is the mochen de gadlos, some far greater, expansive mochen. Now we'll understand. This will also explain to us this that we asked earlier. If today's days, we said, we draw down to the seven chambers through our work, we draw down illumination, why doesn't it become immediately 10 chambers? Why does it remain 7? That was the question. We said only in the future is it going to be 10. So why is that? So he says, today's days, they remain 7. Because the main true, we are bringing down illumination, but we're bringing down illumination into the territory of the emotions. In other words, we are enlightening the emotions. And we're enlightening the emotions with 2 types of enlightenment. With a lower enlightenment, with an intelligence that belongs to the emotions. And we're enlightening the emotions even with transcendental intelligence. But even when we're enlightening it with transcendental intelligence, it's still the intelligence that's illuminating in the emotions. But then there is a level of intelligence for the sake of intelligence, which is pure intelligence. And that's only going to happen in the days of Mashiach. And that's when Israel is going to expand to have 10. Because the entire cosmic order is going to experience pure mochen, not mochen that is intelligence, that is informing emotions. So, both the Zavas Cholav Udvash, because even the Zavas Cholav Udvash, the land of milk and honey, is still only a land of 7 nations. Even if you're bringing the honey, it's a very interesting idea. Although we said earlier that it's not the seichel, it's not the intelligence of the emotion. It's a higher intelligence, but it's still being illuminating into the space of the emotion. But pure intelligence, that's above it. And therefore, the entire experience of our emotion is only shining to us through the emotions. Even though we're talking about superior mochen, we don't have access to the mochen of God as it is to itself. We have it only through the emotions. Through the emotions. And that is the reason why it's called an addition. Because the midos really are midos. When you're adding the mochen to it, it's something added to it. It's always an addition. Not in a state of shorish. But there is a state when the first 3 will shine on their own. Shaloi al yedei amidos klal, not through the emotions. We're going to, and that is going to be in the future. Now you do have that every Rosh Chodesh. Kabbalistically it says that in Rosh Chodesh, Malchuth, which is the Shekhinah, receives the mochen of Chabad not through her husband. not through the Ze'er Anpin, not through the Midos. She plugs in directly into the Chabad. And that happens only in Rosh Chodesh. It's a very high illumination into Malchus. Rosh Chodesh mekabelas ha-Malchus memoichen da-Abba ve'ima atzmam. From the mochen of the father and the mother on their own, shaloi al yadei zah, bypassing the Ze'er Anpin. V'ubchines al yoyne yoyser. It's a very high level. And that's why Rosh Chodesh is really Messianic. It's really a futuristic day. Ki kodesh milagar bar mei, v'ukeniskar inyan parshas emar dav tzadik beis, v'nis bar besider, ki amidoy shaychem la'olamais. That the emotions have really a connection to the world. Mashek and chachma and bina are above the world, higher and higher. Completely beyond. Okay. This is going to be in the future world. Which what really means that all intelligence that we've ever experienced, that humans, the entire structure of intelligence that exists within the world, from the beginning of time till the end of time, all of the intelligence is only an intelligence that's funneled through the emotions, but not independent intelligence. We haven't even ever experienced that at all. That whole level of divine experience is going to open up to us only after Mashiach comes. And for that reason, then the emotions are not going to be, the intellect is not going to be considered a add-on. It's going to be considered fundamental, the essential makeup of our existence. And then all 10 nations are going to be given to us. And those other 3 nations, that's the Keni, Knizi, and Kadmoni. He explains Keni is referring to Bina. First of all, Bina is called Kan Sipor, it's called a nest. Keni is also the gematria of 160, which we know that the name of God associated with Bina, the Acharayim of, I forgot what it's called, is Kuf Samach Aleph. I don't remember. I remember the gematria 161, but I don't know how we get to 161. I didn't get a chance to refresh my memory on it. That's the gematria of Keni. Knizi has the word Zakain in it. Knizi has a Kuf Zayin Nun. So it has the word Zakain, and Zakain stands for Chachma. The sages say, what does Zakain mean? Zakain means an elder. Zeh shekana Chachma, the one that acquired wisdom. Kadmoni has the word Kedem, which is referring to Keser, what's before everything. Keni, Knizi, Kadmoni are the 3 nations of the 3 levels of Bina, Chachma, and Keser. And that's going to be added on to the land of Israel after Mashiach comes. And he's going to explain in the further why we couldn't do that until now, why it's so lofty, why it was so difficult, and so on and so forth. But this is still where we're going to do today. I feel like a lot of what I'm saying today I haven't yet digested, but we're working our way. Well, obviously this is futuristic stuff, so we can only dabble in it of what it's going to be. Okay, we still have what to finish, Be'ezus Hashem. Hopefully next week we're going to have already the land of the 10. So we're still going to say, that's what he was talking about. Be'ezrat Hashem.